We are very excited to be joined by the one and only Jordan Shusterman from Cespedes Family Barbecue. Jordan, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you, man. Always love your insight. And of course, excited to talk to you about the first half of the MLB season. I guess that's my first question is, what are your thoughts on what the first half has been like so far?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you guys are really, really in the thick of it. I think you're definitely not the only podcast doing a should we buy or sell conversation.
Right?
I think that's
What is going on?
roughly half the league right now. And I feel like in terms of just big picture narratives, I feel like that's kind of the thing that kind of stands out to me. And with with the All-Star break coming up, it's a good time. It's a good time to kind of reflect on that stuff. But I'm in draft mode, guys. I know big draft coming up for the
Oh, yeah.
Snakes. I'm super excited to see what they do, and it's just, yeah. I think I was reflecting on this. I'm heading down to Texas tomorrow, but Jake and I at Cespedes BBQ, like we do as you guys know, like we kind of do everything, which means like the futures game and the draft is like on its own a lot of stuff that we're doing, and then we also are doing the Homer Derby and the All-Star game and everything, right? Like I feel like a lot of the prospect people are doing those two things and then they leave. We're like, nope, so we are in for quite a week, but I'm excited to see
Yes.
you two guys down there as well.
Yeah, we can't wait for that.
Jordan, the Diamondbacks pick 29th, apparently, because apparently they went to the World Series, and the ramifications of that is that they're not picking nearly as high
Huge
as they
mistake.
have in recent years. So they have the 29th pick. They have the 31st pick as well. That because of Corbin Carroll winning the Rookie of the Year award, part of the new prospect promotion incentive that MLB installed recently. They also have the 35th overall pick. That's a competitive balance round A pick. So they don't have, they're not picking in the top 5 or anything like that this year, but they've got several draft picks kind of bunched together. What do you think their options are going to be like at that spot? I mean, is that a reasonably good position for them to be in?
Yeah, I mean, they're not picking in the top 5, but I believe they have a top 10 sized bonus pool at the very least. And what that
Yeah, it's
means
big.
is it really enables you to do some interesting things. I know the Mariners were in a very similar situation last year, and they just put out a whole documentary about it, which is
Yeah.
now part of that is because the players that they drafted have had very strong starts to pro ball, and it's kind of risen the status of their farm system. But they had 4 picks on day 1 of last year's draft, part of which because of the same thing where Julio got them, a first round pick by winning Rookie of the Year, and then they had a competitive balance pick, and they had the pick, in the back half of the first round, and it just enables so much more flexibility, and especially in a draft like this, where especially the high school class, once you get past the first 4 or 5 names, basically anybody could be in play for them that they want is on the high school level. And I don't know how you guys feel, you're never really drafting for need, but I do think that like in some cases you are sometimes drafting for need within a farm system, not necessarily big league need, but sometimes you're trying to fill out different layers of a farm system. And I think for Arizona, they're just going to have a lot of opportunities, and let's hope. Man, listen, it wasn't, what was it, 2019 or 2018 when they had like 8 picks in the top 100. Some of those went
like
well,
that.
some of those not so much. So they've had experiences with this before, but it's still a great opportunity at the very least.
How would you describe just the quality of this draft overall?
Yeah, I think I'm such a draft dork that like I love talking about this stuff. And part of me is bothered when I pull up you'll see this on multiple outlets where it's like the first thing you read in a draft preview is this draft isn't very good once you get past top 10. I'm like, well, okay, well, that's no
Right.
fun. And also the reality is like the draft is as good as you make it. I mean, there's going to be some of the best players will come after the first round anyway. I
Sure.
just published my top 50 prospects for for this upcoming draft. And, I'm trying to reflect where the industry is feeling, right? I'm trying to, no, I mean, it's my own evaluations as well, but I'm trying to give a sense of these are the guys we can expect to hear on day 1, right? And I hope that those are the names we hear on day 1. But man, we don't know. Like, especially with the variance with the high school players, like
Yeah.
look at Gunnar Henderson, right? I mean, Corbin Carroll's a
Yeah.
version of this too. But look at Gunnar Henderson, right?
Yeah.
It's not like teams didn't know who he was, but no one was like, yeah, he's obviously a first, top 10 pick, right? And
Yeah.
there's a huge difference between going in the top 10 and even once we get into the second half of day one, let alone days 2 and 3. So I think any draft can be a strong draft or weak draft. We will have no idea for years from now.
Well, there are obviously some built-in challenges that other sports don't face with their draft, but MLB's draft just seems to be the one that lacks the most interest. And I know you guys do a great job of getting us prepared for it, and kind of, you guys hype it up more, I think, than maybe even Major League Baseball does themselves. But what can they do better to promote the MLB draft? Like, is it just the timing, having it occur during the All-Star game in the middle of the season?
Yeah.
Is it the fact that we never know with baseball players if they're actually going to, work out as a major leaguer?
I think that some of it has naturally become a little bit easier to follow for a casual fan just because of where college baseball is and has become a lot more accessible, and how those players have become a lot more noticeable. And then also even the prep players, I think certainly of a younger generation. Um, I hate that I can say that, but I do think it's true. like an example like Max Clark last year, or even like a Drew Jones, right? I know it's a little bit different. I think Max Clark is a better example because he was a kid in the middle of nowhere, Indiana, who had more Instagram followers than 95% of big leaguers, right?
Right.
And like, there's some versions of that this year too, with guys like Connor Griffin, right? Like, there's some of these players now have been, even in the high school levels, have been quote unquote famous in these baseball, social media spaces for a while. And so there's opportunities there for the players themselves to kind of grow the event. And I think that will kind of happen naturally. As for what the league can do, I mean, they're trying to make the combine a thing. We went and covered the combine. We had a great time, but we also didn't necessarily come away thinking, this should be like the grand television event. I think it clearly still is very limited in that sense, but that's okay. I think it still serves an important purpose. But for us, it's all about how can we bridge the gap between not worrying too much about like this guaranteeing this guy is going to be the face of your franchise, but telling these interesting stories, because that's the beauty of the draft, is that these players are coming from so many different places in a way that, not that isn't true in other sports, but it's not quite to the same degree, I feel like, personally. Whereas obviously, and it's just so many more picks, so there's so many more stories to tell, which is, I think, the fun part for me.
Jordan, of course, we're looking at mock drafts, and it really seems like people have no idea what the Diamondbacks are going to do at 29, at 31, or at 35. I'm seeing some of the same players pop up in different picks for them. But there was some level of consensus. Both ESPN and Baseball America have the Diamondbacks taking Walker Janik. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. Catcher out of Sam Houston State. We also have a Malcolm Moore, another catcher out of Stanford, over on MLB Pipeline. The chances of the Diamondbacks actually winding up with one of those two players, I don't feel great about. But just so we can say that we talked about real names, what do you what do you know about those two guys?
Sure. Well, back to the first thing about just their bonus pool, like, it would, because what that flexibility gives you is the ability to go over slot. Generally, that is going to involve high school players. So that doesn't mean that all three of those first three early picks are all going to be high school players, although that is what the Mariners did. Like, that is an option, right? I think you can assume, it's easier to balance out and say, let's go get this high schooler that is projected to go pick 20. We can get him at 29 or 35. We're going to have to pay him a little bit more, and then we'll save him. We'll pay a college player later. But you could also just go 3 high schoolers and then figure it out later. There's versions to do that. As for the 2 players you mentioned, I love both of them so much. If you read the rankings that I just put out, it's Yannick for the record.
Thank you.
Just in case they do pick him.
Walker Yannick.
I have a crazy Walker Yannick story that I will tell you guys off the air. What a horrible tease! Horribly unprofessional. But I'm going to do it anyway. It's just not. It's not. The point is, let's talk about him as a baseball player. Both of these guys, too. They are my top 2 catchers on the board. I don't think that's necessarily consensus. There are some other college catchers like Caleb Lomavita and Jacob Cozart who are kind of in that level. I think Malcolm Moore and Yannick are both awesome and really interesting 2 different stories, because Moore has been known since he was like a sophomore in high school in California, and he ends up, strong commitment to Stanford. He goes there, has a really good, strong 2 seasons. He's a sophomore eligible pick. We talked to him at the combine, one of our favorite conversations that we had for sure. And then Yannick is totally different. Nobody knew who this guy was. He was like the 250th ranked player in the state of Texas 3 years ago. And now he's probably going to be a first round pick because he's just gotten better and better every year at Sam Houston. And the really cool thing with Walker Yannick is last year, man, this dude could have gone in the transfer portal and gone anywhere. He's playing for the Bearcats, And in the age of college baseball, where this is just kind of how it works, if you're balling out at a mid-major, the SEC is going to come calling and say, "Hey,
Mm-hmm.
we'll give you whatever NIL and all these special things, and you get to come play in the SEC." He's like, "No, I'm going to stay in Huntsville, Texas, and I'm gonna stick with my boys." And Bearcats with a K, like you can't leave those guys. And he had an even more amazing season, and I just think he's a really fun player. And yeah, I mean, if catcher is, you guys know how much I love Adrian Del Castillo, but if you're looking at catcher in the org depth chart and seeing it as a weakness, then yeah, it would make a lot of sense. If either of those guys are there that late, where I have them ranked, I think I would be surprised if they make it that far. So I'll just say that. So I think either of those picks would be awesome that late in the first round.
Is there anyone else that kind of stands out to you at those picks as far as your projections go?
Sure. Yeah. So just flipping it over to the high school, just because now I will say I feel way more comfortable talking about the college players just because I have a much greater grasp on them, having watched them play significantly more either in person or, so I will say that I think that there are some really, really interesting high school. There's a really deep group of high school shortstops in this range that all have slightly different skill sets, right? Kellen Lindsey is really the speedy guy. Everyone's comparing him to what Trey Turner basically looked like when he was coming out of high school, and that makes a lot of sense. He's one of the fastest players in the draft, a guy that was hurt last summer. If he wasn't hurt last summer during all the showcase events, he would have been probably easily a first-round pick coming into the year. Instead, no one really knew about him until a month into the season. Wyatt Sanford, another high school shortstop at Texas. Carter Johnson, he's more in like that Gunnar Henderson mold, also from Alabama, so he obviously gets those comps. And there's a lot of pitchers. Like I actually feel better and are more excited about some of those high school pitchers in that range. And it's just going to be how aggressive do they get trying to float some of those guys down to those middle picks.
Transitioning to the All-Star break, Jordan, of course, that is also coming up. Major League Baseball is cramming a whole lot into just a few days with all these events happening. I personally think that Major League Baseball's All-Star festivities are among the best of the major American sports.
He's
if not the best.
They're the best.
I think it's the best. I mean, the NBA All-Star game, like I don't think I've watched that in like more than a decade because it's dumb. But at the same time, I think maybe certain things that baseball does have gotten a little stale. Maybe the home run derby isn't quite the spectacle that it once was. I know they have some rule changes coming on that front. Are there any changes that you would make, Jordan? Do you want to see do we do a bunt competition? Do we do just an all-out skills competition? Do we do an exit velo challenge of some kind? Like how do we spice things up here?
Well, we should note we are getting some of those things for the Futures game. And this is something that the promotion around it has been interesting. And I know I'm not sure if it's going to be televised live or not, but the Futures game they are doing a skill showcase. They're doing bunt challenges. They're doing all that stuff.
There we go.
Let's go.
So that's happening, and I'm very excited to see what that looks like in person, how it's presented to the audience at home. A lot of potential with that, especially it's a good place to kind of test it out with the Futures gamers. Obviously going to be a little bit more likely to do that. But I don't know. I think that it's in an okay spot. I think we'll see if the kind of subtle changes that they made to the home run derby field and format makes any sort of tangible difference in terms of the flow, if it makes people more happy and that it feels like it's more fair. I always thought that was kind of overrated. Like we're just trying to be entertained by home runs. Like everyone getting too bent out of shape about like, oh, he got screwed because he was facing this guy. It's like, what do you want? This is all make believe. Like they're just hitting home runs for 3 hours. Like how serious do we have to take this? And so I'm going to enjoy it no matter what. This is my other problem is when people ask me and it's like, hey, what would you change about baseball? I'm like, I don't know. I'm having a good time. So
you're like nothing. It's perfect the way
you're the ideal consumer already.
Yeah, so. To some degree. But I will say that, like, I think that the Futures game, skills challenge is an example, and so much about baseball now. Just so many of the things that are changing for some people like, some people don't like. The league's trying. The league knows that they want to keep, changing things up and trying new things. And sometimes those are going to be great and sometimes those are going to flop. And like, that's fine. But like, I can commend the league office for at least attempting new things, and we'll see which ones of them actually stick.
I know this is similar to the Bowman hitting challenge, but I want like a Top Golf type thing with targets where they get points, and you can like go for like a long ball if you want to try to get like more points, or you could just like single them to death down the third baseline, something like that.
This is happening. I'm telling. This is literally happening on Saturday. So again, like this is on everyone involved, respectfully, who are doing a very good job. The promotion around this event, and this is my issue too. Like I would say, okay, what is my biggest problem with this? I don't know how to fix that. It's the fact that the futures game is going on while regular season games are still happening. Right.
Yeah.
It's the fact that day 2 and 3 draft. This is really more of a me problem. I can't. I would love to spend all day following day 2 and 3 of the draft. It's not possible because they're on Monday and Tuesday. I said years ago that the futures game should be Sunday Night Baseball. Leading into the All-Star game. Like that would be the way to do it.
Yeah.
Instead, it's now Saturday afternoon and they've made it 7 innings. And so it's like the kind of mixed messages there also kind of frustrates me because it's like you want to do it, but then by cramming all of it into one weekend, like on the surface, it's like, oh, that makes so much sense. We're like maxing it out. And then on the other hand, it's like, okay, everything is probably being detracted by the other on top of the fact that regular season games are still going on. And you just have a majority audience that are not going to be able to pay attention to it.
So it's like the opposite of the NFL, where the NFL needs to stretch their season out and make everything into an event so that it feels like it's there all year. Baseball has too much. They're like, we got to figure out where to get this stuff in at.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's that's my one thing. And at this point, especially now that you have moved the draft there, like I don't know what the solution is for the futures game in particular. But you guys will be there by Saturday. If you are, then you will see it. You will see what we're talking about here.
Can't wait.
Last thing for me here, Jordan. I just want to give you the very small task of fixing the Diamondbacks. They're two games under 500.
Please.
Trade deadline approaching. What do you got?
Yeah, man. I mean, it's weird because they've kind of hovered around like the same playoff odds for pretty much 2 months, and so like all these teams, it's so hard in this National League mess to like get too excited or concerned when you're just always kind of in it. I don't know. Like, I know these last couple losses were really not fun, but they were kind of on a little bit of a run there, especially offensively. It felt like they were really clicking. But I mean, Jesse, we talked about this before the season. Like, the bullpen situation now, you thought that like Paul Sewell was in theory the one thing we were counting on, right? And now here we are, and that sucks. I love Paul Sewell more than anyone, and of course I want him to figure it out. But we knew that this was going to be a thin group, and I mean, this is the most obvious team in the league if they're going to try something to just go start patching it together. I mean, even a trade like what the Mets just did, going and getting Phil Maton, it doesn't look necessarily like a huge deal on the surface, but that can pay dividends. The Mets, talk about the few bullpens that have been worse in Arizona recently is the Mets. I mean, it's like they were like, listen, maybe we're not going to be buyers, but if we have any chance of like sticking around in this thing, we got to figure this out. And so you bring in something like that. So I could see them doing something like that. Being much more aggressive than that, I don't know. I feel like they're going to play we got Erod. He's our trade deadline acquisition. And there's some validity to that, but then you can also understandably kind of roll your eyes.
And that's my question is, with those guys returning, I mean, you have Jordan Montgomery, who has been a disappointment this season, but also, at times has shown glimpses of what we thought we were going to get out of him. It just has glimpses, maybe 2 games this season. But it does feel like the Diamondbacks get back Merrill Kelly, they get back Jordan, they get back, Erod after presumably some of them after the All-Star break, one of them maybe, or after the trade deadline. Does that make it so that this team doesn't really need to panic? I mean, considering those arms are going to be back to the starting rotation?
I mean, I do look at them in this mix of teams, and I do think that the best version of them is probably right there as the first team. Like, I still, talent-wise, I think I still have them behind San Diego. And at this point, standings-wise, like, St. Louis has built something of a cushion, and I picked the Cardinals to win the division, and I just still don't think that's going to happen. But like, I was pretty confident that St. Louis would have a better season this year, and that's been mostly true.
Yeah.
So I think Arizona's like they should be the best version of them. Should be good enough to be right there. and so it's like, how much more gains are you really getting by pushing that much farther? And also remember, like the starting rotation stuff, it all compounds. I mean, your bullpen is getting taxed, and then that is something in the sport that is like it's even though it's happening right in front of you, it's all connected. Like the pitching staff is all connected, and like clearly that has an impact on the performance of everybody.
Well, before we let you go, you did join the show with the title of #1 Yilber Diaz fan. Since you are the #1 Yilber Diaz fan, we wanted to get your thoughts on his performance and what he did the other night.
Listen, guys, like this is another one where pitching in 2024, like this dude, all these guys, like the development now is just so good that it was with the right tweaks and with the right people and athletes, you can create these major league starters who, okay, maybe he's not going to go be a rookie of the year, but like even the fact that you can develop a player like that to give you, 6 really good innings with all these injuries, right? It's also one of those funny things. It's like, where has this guy been? Why hasn't he been starting for the last however many months? And we know it's not that simple, but it's just so cool. I mean, it's just a reminder that pitching in particular can really, really sneak up on you in an exciting way. And I don't know, you guys have a better sense as to what the long-term, plan is for him and how often we're going to really be seeing him start moving forward. But it's cool, man. If you can pitch in Reno and Amarillo for that matter, like you're doing something right. That's how I always said about the Dbacks pitchers. It's like, damn, I literally don't even know I don't have to know what you're throwing. If you're getting outs in those places, you are doing something right.
Well, we appreciate you so much for stopping by. Make sure to follow everything him and Jake are doing over there at Yahoo Sports on the Barbicast. And you are at is it J_Shusterman? Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Yep. J_Shusterman.
I'm terrible with names. You'll learn that.
Oh, you're good. You're good. I'm this is what I get for having a second underscore and having
the second underscore.
My ancestors for my name, I guess. So, you're good. It's always a pleasure, guys. Always.
We appreciate you, man. Thank you again for stopping by. We'll see you in Texas.
See you soon.